Hey guys, Vol here, how's it going? We're going to be talking about the new SHASVASTI. Guys, so the Daedalus Falls book has recently come out. Army 6 has been updated. Hope you guys liked the April Fool's video, by the way. We put a lot of work into that. If you haven't checked it out, it's still on the page as usual. But a whole bunch of new changes. I don't think I'm going to do like a holistic review of the whole book. It would take too long. What I might do is actually a series of sectorial breakdowns. And I know you guys love the army reviews more than anything, so I'm sure you'll be happy to hear that. But we are going to focus on the SHASVASTI first because I think they're the real blockbuster. They're the real winner of this book, and they're one of my favorite sectorials. A lot of other people out there as well. By the way, shout out to my boys who played SHASVASTI back when they were cool. SHASVASTI is a sectorial which has had old, outdated models longer than just about any other, range within infiNity, and also their rules have been old and outdated for the longest time. A lot of us thought that they might have been shafted, just like the French faction were, for example. But no, they're back and they're being reinstated, they're being reinvigorated, reinvented, however you want to call it. So we're going to go into it. We're going to talk about strategy. We're going to talk about the profiles. We're going to be talking about this and that. Really important thought, though, that given how much Corvus Belli put into this recently, it's very, very likely they're going to get a lot of resculpt. So it's probably not a good idea to go down the path of explaining, what stuff should you buy. If anything, you should really just be investing in stuff like Dr. Worm and the remotes and stuff while you wait for the actual resculpts to come around, because they're probably going to make a new SHASVASTI box set, starter set, I'm guessing. A lot of the characters and bits and pieces will be resculpted, I hope, and they'll probably look really, really amazing as well. So we're going to talk about SHASVASTI, and maybe in future videos we'll cover off the other new stuff, for Huxlum and Nomads and all of the new NA2 and Spiral Core and all of that, but it's going to be a SHASVASTI video. SHASVASTI. They've always been a bit of a weird faction. They've always been thought of as that faction that just runs a lot of camo markers, although whenever I play them, I never really lean that hard on the mass camo markers, although I still have a few of them. They're also thought of as this sort of survivalist alien race, from the fluff, where they're just really trying to make it in the universe, and they get taken under the wing of the EI, or however you want to look at it, or assimilated partially, and they're just trying to hang in there. But they're a lower number sort of force, highly technological. They're not a lot about heaps and heaps of cheap orders, but they've got some really exotic and interesting profiles. So let's get into it. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is our friend here, Agent Shishkin, because this is really what a lot of people are talking about right now as far as the Daedalus Falls book is concerned, and what SHASVASTI is like as a new faction now. So, as you guys know, I play a lot of SHASVASTI, and last year I played them in a major tournament in New Zealand where I live and where I play. And you can go and look up, the explanation. I recommend that, actually. Check out my video series on that, because I broke down the lists for the tournament, the strategies, all of the games, how it all panned out, and I had Shishkin in my main list. Because Shishkin's a really powerful trooper in my view. So long as you know what you're doing and you make the right decisions, having that single wound plus NWI wasn't so much of a liability. And if you look at her potential, she's very fast, very good at shooting. The nanoscreen allows her to get around the table more reliably and without having to sort of stop at corners and things like that. And if you understand the nuances of the rules and understand the strategies you need to do to get into close combat properly, she starts sucking the life out of people and becoming a monster. So this is a model, this is a profile that was good. And, I played it. Not a lot of other people did. But I think what's happened here is that the designers of this game, Corvus Belli, have come along and gone, okay, this is a model that people aren't really buying very much, probably because it looks like that. It's an older sculpt. And it's a model people aren't including in their lists very much. So let's give her a buff. And it ended up not being just one buff, but 3 buffs. She went from having a single wound in NWI to just having a flat 2 wounds, meaning she's way more reliable. You have the ability to attack something, potentially take a wound or 2, and revive her with a doctor, whereas you couldn't really do that before. So that's a straight up buff. Secondly, she's linkable, so she can go on a link team where she couldn't before. There's no downside to that. It's just an option. You can still run her by herself if you want to, but now you have the opportunity to run her in a 3-man, 4-man, or 5-man link, which is just a straight buff. It just straight up makes her better. And then, as if that wasn't already enough, they've given her Fatality level 2, which is a rule that was considered overpowered and too much and broken by a lot of members of the community when they gave it to Tariq. And now they're giving it to Shishkin, who's actually better than Tariq, and they're making her linkable as well. So not only does her chance to crit go through the roof, but having an additional dice on there means there's another 10% chance sort of factored in there from that dice to score a critical hit. Now, I'm not going to sit down here and do the maths for you, but I think everybody knows that this is a little bit, of an eyebrow raiser. So what does this all mean, and how do we react to this? Well, from the perspective of me being a person that owns the model and plays her anyway and was going to play her anyway, does this increase my chance of beating people and winning games of infiNity and doing better at tournaments? Of course it does. Obviously it does, because there's still going to be other people who don't play Shishkin, don't play SHASVASTI, because they want to play their other factions, and I'll be sitting here with this monster of a model, and that's going to help me. So from that purely selfish perspective, yeah, it's a great change. If you're sitting there sort of gloating about, how well your SHASVASTI are going to do from home, and looking forward to getting on the battlefield, well, you may be really happy about, that change. From a bigger standpoint, though, a bigger picture, if we ask the question, well, is this good for infiNity? Does this make the tabletop wargame better? I've got to say flatly no. It's actually made infiNity worse. I actually think this is a really bad games design choice, because you're taking a model that's balanced and you're making it unbalanced. You're making it more powerful than it needs to be. Not by so much, you're not going to suddenly just magically win all of your games because of this. You're still win a very, very playable game. But you're taking something which was actually at an optimal level and moving it somewhere else, which is not the right choice. Secondarily, people who are new at infiNity, who haven't really experienced it, who are forming their very fragile impressions based on their first contact with the game, if they play against somebody who's running Shishkin and all they see is just the crits popping up left and right from 5 dice worth of shots, or Shishkin just pummeling them anyway because she's a powerful character, that can be very oppressive and demoralizing for people, making them have that knee-jerk reaction going, oh gosh, this game is kind of broken and it's not very fair, and I think that any model with those rules is a bit too much. Which, as you guys know, when you introduce new people to that, you only get one chance sometimes. People are very stubborn once they've had a bad experience with something. They'll never go back to that restaurant, or they'll never sort of try watching that TV series again. And in this case, they'll never try this particular tabletop wargame again because they saw something which really discouraged them and really left a bad taste in their mouth. So I think that Corvus Belli's decision to buff Shishkin through the roof sucked. I think it's not the best choice, but it's here to stay. We're probably going to have to live with it, so may as well make the most of it, right? Shishkin. Note also, of course, they've done a similar thing with Tariq anyway, even though they didn't need to. Like, Tariq was already too powerful with Fatality level 2 by himself, and now they've made him linkable too. The only thing about Rama Task Force, though, I won't get into too much, is that they lose a lot of other things within the sectorial, whereas SHASVASTI have really only made gains. So we're not going to talk about Huckstein on this, we're going to talk about the SHASVASTI. Let's get into it. So, obviously, Aida Swanson's the first on my left to right review of profiles, but, since Shishkin's the main thing we're going to be talking about today, let's just come back and just revisit her for a second. Okay, so the profile that I'd recommend taking, and that I will take almost always, is the Lieutenant option with the Red Fury and the Pulsar and the Discharges. So, criminally, this is only a single SWC point, when what you're getting here is a Red Fury which has better range bands than a Spitfire, all things considered. It does the same damage as the Spitfire if you're factoring in Fatality level 1. And it costs less SWCs than a Spitfire would. Spitfires tend to cost 2 SWCs when they're in the hands of a complete, shooting monster. And Shishkin is more monstrous than the most monstrous of shooters, right? So she's Bliss skill 15 in a link team, which she can very easily be in because she's a wild card. She's throwing 5 dice. So you don't even have to score a crit. A lot of the time, the 15 is going to be enough. If you really want to get super monstrous with her, and I know a lot of you guys are going to be wanting to, you put her in a 5-man link team that includes maybe some Knox Troopers, and she's Bliss skill 18. She's very mobile. As soon as she gets around to the back line, she's starting to hit on 21, so it's like you've got 5 dice, and if each of any of those dice either comes up as a 1, a 19, or a 20, so 3 possibilities per dice, times 5 kind of thing, then that's a crit. Should that really be in the game? I don't think so, but it's there, right? So that's a possibility. Close Combat 24, Prothyon level 3, 3 will typically make that Close Combat 27. She can use her hands, so to speak. Doesn't have to use a pistol or double action Close Combat weapon. She can use her straight up Prothyon to remove wounds from them and put them on her. So with 2 wounds now, she can potentially go up to 4 wounds, I think it is, just by getting into Close Combat. Note that if something else, maybe another member of her link team, shoots a model, renders it unconscious, or maybe she shoots a 2-wound model and takes it to unconscious, she can just walk over to the corpse, dig up the corpse, and get those free wounds. When you're investing your lieutenant and your 54 points into that model and making it really important, your opponent's going to have such a hard time removing it as well with the 4 wounds there, which is quite disgusting. Now, why is she the lieutenant? The reason why is that, you're taking a lieutenant that you don't have to spend any extra SWCs on, not that you have to with, say, mentors, for example, but the beautiful, beautiful Caliban has been upgraded now, and it's got this absolutely massively wonderful profile here for 29 points, the chain of command profile, and this guy is just really, really good. This profile is excellent. It reminds me of how good the Killer Hacking Ninja is for a similar number of points. So the amazing thing here is that when you've got Close Combat 23 and Prothyon level 3, that's effectively Close Combat 26. And one thing that most other Prothyon models can't do is the usage of the surprise attack. So coming out of Camo State, you're subtracting 6 from them, you're on CC 26, and as soon as you win that or get a crit or something, you're using Prothyon to go up wounds. So it's an absolute midfield Close Combat monster, starts up there with forward deployment level 2, and one thing it can do a lot better than the Ninja is the submachine gun and the shooting and the pulsar, which the Ninja doesn't have. So, yeah, the Ninja's still better in terms of being hidden deployment and having a killer hacking device and blah blah blah. But this guy does a few things the Ninja doesn't. So it's at that level. It's at the sort of desirability sort of factor way up there. But we'll come back to the Caliban shortly. Shishkin is a model that I would run as the lieutenant if you are running her, because the Caliban's going to be in there as well, right? Unless, of course, you're going for quite a big list with, multiple combat groups, and the mentor may be better in that case as the lieutenant just because of counterintelligence. But if I'm running Shishkin, it's most likely going to be as, that alpha striking limited insertion bully. Damn. Okay. Yep, well, there it is. By the way, she has the SHASVASTI rule, which wasn't particularly useful for her previously because she wouldn't drop down to unconscious. She'd be removed from the table because of NWI. Whereas now, if you drop her to unconscious, the SHASVASTI will keep her points on the table for certain missions. So that's, another sort of hidden buff, really, if you like. But damn, what a monster. Even has the D-charges for anti-material, double action as well for removing objectives and things like that, which is really cool. And just all-round, just bonkers stats. Really, really good. So yeah, Shishkin will be appearing in a lot of lists. As I'll talk about a little bit later, you don't necessarily have to take Shishkin. There are actually some other ways to build lists which don't include her, which can still be pretty good. Just going to pause for a second and say that I did play a game with the new SHASVASTI this week, and ironically, after frothing at the mouth over Shishkin and talking her up for the last 5 or 10 minutes, I did lose this game, and Shishkin did die because there was a moment in this game where she came up against a brigada, mobile brigada in a link team from Corregidor, and went at him with the 5 dice, stripped a wound off him straight away, and then on the next order, the missile launcher rolls a crit, and Shishkin doesn't get any crits, and because I have a doctor nearby, I'm thinking, okay, just going to pass one of the armor saves, but no, passes both of the other armor saves, and is removed. So this was a really bad game for me here with SHASVASTI. It didn't particularly help that after deploying all of my models and choosing to take the first turn, I realized I was up against Corregidor and not Caledonia, because my opponent usually plays Caledonia, so I couldn't be bothered redeploying all of my guys knowing his faction, so that was, you know, a bit of a silly thing. I wasn't taking the game that seriously is what I'm trying to say. I very nearly won by the end of it, because my Caliban did so well, but yeah, not my finest moment. We will be seeing some impressive Shishkin battle reports coming up. Don't you worry about that. Okay, Aida Swanson, Submondo Smuggler. So this model's not new, it's been out for a little while now, and other factions can take her as well. This model reminds me of the Krakot, because like the Krakot, it's got forward deployment, can be decent in close combat, double SMGs. It's slightly better at shooting than the Krakot is, because, you know, you don't have mimetism, you can gain cover. You don't have impetuous, you can gain cover, and she's got mimetism, I meant to say. But she's not quite as devastating in close combat because she doesn't have that ability to add +3 for the chest mines or Berserk, for example, and she's a bit more expensive. So what you're doing here is you're sort of trading a little bit, and I don't particularly love her because she's not a specialist, and if she's playing the role of the heavy-hitting shooter in your army, you'd be better off probably doing that with something else, like a Q-Drone, or Shishkin, or anything else on a link team, to do that job. And you've got some other models which are very good upfield, like the new Malignus Killer Hacker, the Shrouded as always, they can get up there. So I wouldn't really bank on her for the shooting. If she was a specialist, yeah, I'd take her a bit more. But for the specialist role, you've also got, you know, 24, 25 points going into a Shrouded, which is in camo state. Scavenger is a really, really cool rule, but not so cool that you can really justify filling one of these slots in your list with this model. It's not so much about the points. She is worth it for her points. It's just that, you know, you can only afford so many, you know, models, and they take up slots, so to speak. And like, what other thing could you get for that points bracket? If you look around, we will be finding profiles here which are in the mid-20s, which are a little bit more useful for our overall game plan and our SHASVASTI strategy than Aida. I'm not saying don't ever take her, I'm not saying I'm never going to take her, but generally there are just more useful profiles for winning the game overall than Aida. But she does have a lot of style points. Viral Mines, Viral Pistol are really, really cool as well. I find it, and I love her model. Really love the miniature. Okay, Jayth Cutthroat. So we can finally move on to something nice and fresh and new and interesting. The thing about these guys, I don't want anybody to fall in love and marry the Jayth Cutthroat and love their profile, because they are quite expensive for a single wound model that does start in your deployment zone. So we're going to examine all of the profiles the way that I normally do. There are the categories. Is it a Rambo piece that goes and shoots things and you know, devastates the enemy line from you know, an attacking perspective, maybe very fast? Is it some kind of thing with an HMG that clears enemy arrows really easily and gets rid of that, you know, awful situation at the start of the game where you've got a walker there and a sniper there and a missile launcher there? Is it going to do that? Or is it a cheerleader that just sits back and defends your deployment zone and adds value in terms of its free order? Or is it a specialist that goes around pressing buttons? If we look at the Jayth, it doesn't neatly and nicely fit into any of those particular roles. And for the amount of points you spend on it, it's sort of hard to prefer it over, you know, your basic and boring Shrouded or Malignus or something like that, or Dr. Worm, for example. However, it is really, really interesting. So we've got a model here that looks like it's pretty good in close combat, 23 plus Natural Born Warrior. So yes, it's going to win most close combat fights, and it's going to be annoying to remove with close combat specialists. Bliss skill 12, and some of the guns you can put with this guy. It's got a submachine gun and a Red Fury profile, Vulcan shotgun, what's not to like. It's going to win a lot of shootouts due to ODD, but again, ODD is not as nice as Marcus State. MSV1's really cool, giving you the opportunity to see through forest a bit more easily and ignore mimetism, stuff like that. Mitigates the TO camo and ODD a bit from the enemy. Shock immunity is nice, but normally you'd like to see shock immunity in combination with Dogged or NWI, which is not the case here. Armor 0, but BTS 6. Again, it would be cool if that was bioimmunity, so it could use the BTS 6 in some circumstances. So it's a bit patchy here. All of the profiles have EM grenades, which I love. Physical 13 to make you land those shots a bit more easily. But again, it's got to start from your deployment zone and go over there and then land the EM grenades. So it's not that easy in practice, I feel. On paper, you might be thinking, yeah, I can get away with it. But there's not going to be that higher proportion of games where you get that value out of it. One extremely interesting thing is that it can team up with one of the new Tiger creatures, which is a really cool little warband, very similar to the Preta and the Hungry, mainly different because it doesn't have climbing plus. But for 31 points, you're getting something which is a little bit like an Orcs Trooper from Pano, although obviously much better, but then again, you're paying like twice as much for it. So I think a lot of people are going to be experimenting with this guy in days to come. I may run one every so often, but in the long term, I do have the sneaking suspicion that this guy is going to be left at home a lot. If I do look at the specialist operative that is in there, 32 points, guy that starts in the deployment zone, yeah, I'd much rather use a faster trooper or a trooper that can start further up the field or one that's cheaper for that particular role. Vulcan shotguns are very, very good on stuff that drop in with airborne deployment or deploy way up there or have impersonation or anything like that, or are going to be brought along with a link team, for example. So I think the Jayth Cutthroat is cool, it's viable, it's interesting, but I'm not blown away by the usefulness of the profile in general. So far, haven't tested it, but I doubt that this guy's going to be as much of a presence in my games. Dr. Worm, tried and true, nothing new to say about this guy. He's a staple Combined Army piece. One criticism that people have made is that Combined Army leans a little bit too hard on this miniature, and there aren't very many viable alternatives to him, and that is true. He's a bit annoying that he's Silhouette 3. The Sophotect is better in that regard because she obviously has NWI and is a bit smaller and easier to sort of keep safe. But I can't imagine not taking one of these guys, really. Seed Soldiers are the classic line trooper from the old classic starter set. And I never really took them because I always looked at it and went, well, it's supposed to be a line infantry trooper, but it's sort of costing mid-teens, to field it. And a lot of my lists really just came down to having the 2 Echidrons and an R-drone, and then just spending the rest of the points on other stuff without having to go for too many more cheerleaders. Is this a fighting unit? No. Is it a good specialist? No. Is the Seed Embryo useful? Well, you've got 4 deployment level 2, and you've got the chest mine there, but the thing is, it's a static piece, right? So it's hard to see this thing being used as like a 16-point mine, if you know what I'm saying, or something that's just going to go out there and maybe defend itself with a chest mine and then turn into a specialist, for example. You've got a lot of other options now in your list where you're going to have like a camo marker out there with a specialist ability anyway, or you may attach mine layer to something that's out there, either the new Speculo or just the typical old Shrouded. So I don't really feel like these guys have been changed in such a way that I'll actually take them a lot, especially with there being these new Knox troops now where these guys are actually a useful line trooper. You're paying a little bit less for your line infantry guy now, and he's coming with a zapper, which can be really useful anyway for that direct template defense. And he doesn't start as a thing, as a seed embryo, so yeah, I don't really know. I'll be a little bit annoyed if they have a new starter set which is just full of these guys. I'd rather they had the Knox Troopers, to be honest. Cadmus, again, this is a guy who's been in the lineup, has been in the inventory, the bestiography, but he is a little bit different now with his chest mines as well, and he's the only real way to have an airborne deployment trooper in your list. So if you really need airborne deployment, I guess he's the only way to do it. But I haven't really thought very hard about this guy. He can drop down near to enemy troopers and use Morphoscan on them, as far as I know. I believe Morphoscan can hit an enemy model. They did change the wording of a lot of these rules recently. A Daedalus Fall, there we go. So, the target must be an enemy model possessing the wounds attribute. For some reason I thought it could previously be used on friendly troopers too, but anyway. So you go up nearby and Achilles is sitting there and you morphous scan Achilles and he's -9 to his reset and he fails that, and you pick up his movement 6-4 and CC 24 and ballistical 15 and physical 15 or whatever he's got there. So, you know, a play like that's going to yield amazing value. But a lot of the time, when you're spending the points on a drop trooper, it's just going to be shooting something a lot of the time. Doing the morphous scan's still going to take an order, and it still may fail. So that could be annoying. You have to pass a whip check, right? Let's just check. It doesn't require a roll. Okay, but they can reset at -9. So if you're trying to take Achilles, for example, he's going to be able to reset on, you know, a fairly high willpower and may actually pass. It's cool to see a drop trooper with Red Fury, though. Shock ammunition can be quite hard to come by with drop troopers, so that's probably the pick that I would take. I love the fact that the killer hacking advice is on the hacker rather than the old assault hacker, so that allows you more opportunity to get in range of the hacker you're trying to destroy without having to come too close to repeaters, for example. So that is cool. So yeah, I think he looks really, really cool. I don't think it's specifically because of the Morphos scan or the chest mine Cadmus seed or anything like that, or even the decoy. We've got to talk about the decoy. That can actually make him quite handy. Yeah, so if it's a little bit like the new Helots, right? So decoy is actually kind of handy. That makes him easier to land. Once he has landed, once he does start shooting things, if he hasn't done Morphos scan, his stats are a little bit lackluster for that kind of thing. But hey, pretty cheap here. I mean, if you're just going for a throwaway drop trooper, it's not going to be hard, you know, if you get the drop on them, to pick up more than your points worth. I love the fact there's an assault pistol in there as well. So yeah, I am not going to rate this guy with a low rating. I would say that he is very viable, very usable, and anytime I feel I'm in a meta or playing missions or against particular opponents where drop troopers are more useful than, you know, market value, so to speak, if you're looking at a higher than expected value return on drop troopers, then I'd have no hesitation taking this guy whatsoever. Okay, the Hydux. This is interesting because they've now given this guy multispectral visor level 2, and I don't think that he had that before. Pretty sure he didn't. So this is the sapper with the multi-sniper rifle. And marksmanship level 1 is going to give him shock on top of his AP marksman rifle and multi-sniper rifles. That's nice. Yeah, the only thing that I feel you know, is a little bit disappointing here is that this particular guy can't be in a link team. Like, if he was a special link team option to go in Knox Troopers, for example, I'd definitely be running this guy a fair bit because he can tag along with him with 4-4 speed, no worries, and then you can crank out the MSV2 once they start defending themselves with smoke. I mean, imagine this guy sitting in a smoke grenade in a link team going up against, like, a cutter, for example. Well, he ignores the TO camo and all of that, sees through the smoke, and he's got armor penetration on his marksman rifle. That'd be amazing. But if it's just him, right, it's just, you know, Bliss skill 12, burst 3, it's going to take a while to wear a model like that down. So that's a bit of a shame. Yeah, as an ARO piece with the multi-sniper, I mean, MSV2 is there, but the new Gwaileo is just so much better at doing that kind of thing. I think it's worth splashing out and getting the points for him instead of this guy. I'm not going to say that he's bad. I'm not going to say that he's unuseful. I just find it a little bit disappointing that he doesn't have more potential than he currently does. Because I love the fact you've got MSV2 and marksmanship level 1 with those guns. It's just on pretty weak platform. Armor 1, Bliss skill 12. Yeah. I don't know. He doesn't have any Dogged or NWI or anything else fancy. It's just the tech, really. Sapper. Forgot to mention Sapper. The thing about Sapper, though, is that, yeah. I mean, Foxhole is basically just like having cover, right? Possesses the Mimetism and Courage special skills, and, okay. Alright, so you can combine that with cover, I guess. Okay, it's not that bad. I mean, a Mimetism multi-sniper with Shock MSV2. It's starting to feel a bit more like the Kamau or the NIS, but thing about those guys is they never were particularly amazing until they were able to get into link teams. And the NIST sniper was really something that I mostly took because it had armor 3 along with it, so it was a bit easier to prevent it from taking 2 wounds. I don't know. For the cost, though, I think it is pretty good. The multi-sniper rifle, I think that you're going to be in a situation sometimes where you want the 1.5 SWCs in a faction where you can take 3 Noctifers with missile launchers, right? But, yeah, I'm not going to say that this guy's bad. I actually think that he is fairly useful. I guess he doesn't really particularly fit my style of playing infiNity that well, but he may yield a lot of value for you guys. Yeah. So we've got a new line trooper now, the SHASVASTII Knox troops. Total availability, I really like that. It allows you to run a really big list if you particularly wanted to. It's just, once you start taking a whole bunch of them as your tier leaders, like imagine you have a list with, you know, a couple of Echidrons, and you've got your R drone in there, and you've got something cheap like a basic M drone, and then you start filling it out with Knox troopers. You take Lieutenant, Hacker, a couple of Fort Observers, and you've got an HMG in there, and just some plebs. Well, as you can see, you can start growing your list into the 15, 16, and higher order range, but there's just so much amazing technology in all of the other profiles that you're gonna want to start taking some toys. Otherwise, why don't you just go and play Ariadne or whatever faction's gonna have a lot of cheap troopers, for example, Quangshis and all of that. So I don't really feel like that's SHASVASTII's style. I don't think that's really what they're going for. The good thing about the Knox troops is that you can take a few of them and sprinkle them in and allow them to create fire teams with other things. You can add a T-drone in there, but as we've seen time and time again with the other sectorials that have added the smart missile launcher bot to link teams, he's still a little bit of a liability. He's still a little bit clunky. He's not bad, but you know, sometimes it's better just to sink your SWCs into something which can actually attack better, or is a bit more of an interesting ARO piece, so to speak, with other tech. Yeah. Really love the fact that they've got these little zappers. If I recall correctly, zapper is like an Emirat, except it's a small template, so it's basically like the chain colt. It's what a chain colt is to a chain rifle. Zapper is that to an Emirat, I believe. And then you've got the nanopulsar versus pulsar analogy. So all of the different, you know, options are covered in the game now. But a zapper is a really cool piece of tech, and to get a model like this in the past, you were typically paying close to 14 points anyway for, you know, a model with BS11 and Whip 13 and a couple of extra special rules, right? So SHASVASTII, Bioimmunity, and Stealth, usually you pay a little bit for that, and the Zapper in there, for me, makes it worth it. Again, I'm not going to take tons and tons of 14-point guys with this particular profile, but it's just what the doctor ordered, really, to come in and add an extra guys, a couple of guys to your link team that may involve Vector Mesa, or, of course, Shishkin. So straight away, if you want to, you go back to Shishkin, you chuck her in there, and if you want to, you know, really maximize Shishkin, she's going to want to be in with these guys. So you take a little team she can move out with, like a couple of basic plebs. You take maybe a Fort Observer and a Paramedic. Paramedic's quite a nice touch, because if you really do get stuck out there and Dr. Worm's too far away, and Shishkin's just had a stroke of awful luck and is unconscious, you've got a shot at it with the Paramedic, and because she's going to be called on to take a physical check to be revived, well, she's got big fizz. So here you've spent 113 points, you haven't completely broken the bank, and you've got a model that's moving around, you know, ballistic skill 18, 5 dice, critting on 1s as well as the desired, you know, a number that you need. So this right here is just a bit of a sickening sort of ball buster, and that's before we've even started to sub out a Knox Trooper, Victor Mesa, or anybody else that you want to have in there. So really loving the Knox Troopers, pretty straight up, but I love the flavor that the Zapper adds there. You've even got that SMG EI hacking device in there too, which I think is really cool. So even on your line trooper, you can chuck an SMG in, which is amazing. And 17 points for a basic hacker, that's pretty good. You got Whip 13 in there, and for a basic hacker, you're still mostly just going to be using support wear, right? So this is really, really cool. I find it quite comical that you can either have the SMG or the combi, but you've got to pay an additional 5 points for the combi. Am I reading that right? Is there anything different between those two profiles? No. So a combi rifle costs an extra 5 points. This is the genius of Corvus Belli right here, is that you pay an extra 5 points to basically be +3 at the 8 to 16 range band, whereas what you're giving up is armor piercing or shock, for example. I think the range band is a little bit different at the higher amount, but for 5 points difference, it just blows my mind that that's the thing. Ooh, another really amazing thing is that the lieutenant is free of SWC. So previously you had to take like an Aswang or something like that for your lieutenant, whereas with the new SHASVASTI, let's say you don't want to fork out for a mentor or your Shishkin to be a lieutenant or whatever. Let's say you just want a basic pleb lieutenant for some reason. Maybe because you're playing Decapitation, you just want to hide him, for example. Well, okay, Decapitation, you'd take a mentor for sure, but for some reason you just want to leave him at the back and not take chain of command, well, you've got a 14-point lieutenant right there. Okay, so this Caliban, I'm really, really loving the new Caliban, but it's really specifically that one profile, though, the chain of command SMG pulsar decharges. So let's just go over what you get out of this guy again. So this enables you to basically have Shishkin as your lieutenant or somebody else important as your lieutenant and not go into Lost Lieutenant because you've got a chain of command guy nearby. I even like to take 2 of these guys so you can bounce the chain of command around, right? So that's pretty amazing. He deploys up the field right next to where the objectives are. He's whip 13 for pressing buttons, same as, say, a ninja. He's godlike in close combat because surprise attack, close combat 23, and Prothion, and physical 13 to get the damage done. If some other random model swept through and caused some enemy model to go unconscious, you just come and pick up the corpse and you're a 2-wound model already for a 29-point guy, right? Plus you may be wanting to complete classifieds with that anyway. And then on top of that, he's coming out of Mark Estate with his Pulsar, very rare for, midfield infiltrating models, well, not infiltrating, for deployment level 2 models to have direct template weapons, which is just sickeningly good. D-Charge is very powerful for those objective destruction missions, but also sabotage or even killing a tag in some cases. I mean, you can still come out of Camo Marker state and do surprise attack on a tag and plant D-Charges on him. So this guy's he's really incredible. Kinematic level 2 doesn't hurt. And he's got an SMG on top of it. SMG is a gun which is brilliant at close range, and he's mostly going to be at close range because he's deployed so far up. As for the other profiles, just not as much of a fan. Not as much of a fan of them because, well, let's go through them. Boarding shotgun, cool. You're also being probably just as good with a submachine gun in a lot of cases, but, for the same points you can have chain of command, which is a really desirable skill. Spitfire, well, you're suddenly turning him into a model that's going to be shooting more than anything else and not going to be pressing buttons, not attacking in close combat as much. And for 36 points, you're really wanting to be forking out on other things which do that job a little bit better in terms of Spitfire. I mean, if we compare him to Shishkin for an extra, 15, 16 points kind of thing, it's just no comparison, right? Engineer in there is interesting. This isn't really a faction which is really about the remotes and so forth, but at least there's an alternative to Dr. Worm there for the engineering side of things. Forward Observer boarding shotgun, 1 point more than the SMG. Yep, cool, it's good. I think boarding shotguns are very powerful. I think the best application of a boarding shotgun is when you get like right over to their side of the table. So if you're a drop trooper or if you're in a link team that's going to alpha strike all the way over there, or you're an impersonator. For everybody else, boarding shotgun just doesn't come up with the multi-kills as often as I'd like. Light rocket launcher, again, is this a shooting model or is it an all-rounder model? It's, it's more of a model that has, that midfield specialist utility. It's not really a gun, so to speak, and there are other models that are going to do that a bit better. MSV1 Spitfire, I mean, the points are creeping up higher and higher and higher, and once you've got 40 points to spend, well, couldn't you just go over to the Gwaileo, for example, and, spend that sort of points range and have an MSV2 guy with an AP Spitfire or an HMG, for example, an Albedo and all this other good stuff? I would certainly rather that. So, Caliban, I think the chain of command profile is especially beautiful. There's a really good case to be made, though, for the Forward Observer boarding shotgun, I think. And maybe even the engineer. But really cool that they've got this profile now. It really helps the faction out so much. So Noctifers, we're all relieved to see that, you know, the AVA3 is still there. If you guys watched my ITS games with this faction, you would have seen my list, which had 3 Noctifers in it, just to max them out. If you know you're going to a tournament where there's going to be a lot of open tables, and you're in a meta where people can't be bothered cluttering up tables with too much scenery and there's big long fire lanes, having 3 of these guys can get a little bit disgusting. Bear in mind, though, that if you are not encountering that and people are throwing smoke grenades a lot and there's a lot of sight lanes broken up with big buildings, then it's probably a waste and it's probably SWCs and points that you need elsewhere in your list. I think taking just 2 of them is fine. Just because you can take 3 doesn't mean you have to. Sometimes it'll only be 1, and sometimes you won't take any Noctifers at all. But this missile launcher Noctifer is just an amazing piece. I actually advocate all of these profiles except for the combi rifle. A TO Camo Lieutenant can be very powerful, but still has to pay 1 SWC. So now that we've got like the Mentors and the Knox Trooper and a better Shishkin, I don't think you'll see the Noctifer Lieutenant as much. I sometimes ran him, I don't think I will anymore. The Hacker, yeah, he's cool, but there's some other really amazing hacking options in this faction now that weren't before, so maybe not. So it's really, gold medal goes to the missile launcher amongst these profiles. Silver medal goes to the basic Spitfire, I believe. And, you know, bronze medal probably the combi rifle. I doubt I'd just take a basic combi rifle on this platform. When you're this good, when you're a TO Camo Dogged BS-12 Trooper, you want them to have a decent gun. That's what that profile's all about. So everything I've said in the past about the Noctifers is unchanged. The missile launcher just as good as ever. We're seeing so many link teams and awesome sort of fire teams in this game of infiNity nowadays, and the one bane of a link team that wants to move out, for example, like, you know, Invincible Army, Tactical, you know, Awareness Pain Train, the counter to that, and the one reason why that's not overpowered is because this kind of thing exists, right? You spring your missile launcher, fires the missile at one member of the link team. The template will affect all of the members of the link team because they would have all moved through a point which touched the template. So it's just crazy, crazy destruction. The Mentor, really interesting profile because Combined Army now have counterintelligence, and this is really an amazing profile from my perspective for vanilla. Of course, it's a good profile for SHASVASTII the Sectorial, but it's cool that the Combined Army lineup, the whole vanilla sectorial faction now actually has counterintelligence. What makes this guy even more interesting is that we now have a model in the game that starts in Marker State and has counterintelligence. So after posting a rules question about this on the Australian infiNity forums, Facebook group I should say, apparently the sequence is that your opponent declares that he or she is using a command token in the way that reduces your order pool by 2. And then it comes back to you and you declare, oh, actually, I've got a mentor in Marker State with counterintelligence, so it's only 1. And then they go, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to choose which order group to take that 1 away from. So it can be a bit of a surprise, a bit of a gotcha trap, but it is legit. So don't hesitate to actually use that. I think the more sporting thing to do, and if you're a sportsman like myself, I think it's a good idea to say to your opponent, hey, before you spend the command token to reduce an order pool by 2, bear in mind it's possible for me to have counterintelligence. You don't have to tell them whether you do or not, but I think it's a sporting thing to say, hey, I may have it. And I think that's the fair way to do it. So this guy is not a profile that I would run in a limited insertion list because counterintelligence doesn't get as much value, and without that value, he's just not really worth it, I think. In vanilla Combined Army, I think I will run him a bunch. I'll probably take the Lieutenant option, who's cheapest. If you're going to be spending the points in this guy, you may as well make him the Lieutenant. If you're just going to take the basic boarding shotgun non-Lieutenant, you're effectively paying extra points for counterintelligence without really... okay, sorry, I take that back. Of course he can use counterintelligence without being the Lieutenant, but the cool thing about this guy is that he makes a very well-defended Lieutenant. If you're just taking him purely for counterintelligence, he's still just a cheerleader at the back, which costs 22 points, is the kind of thing I'm going for there. As the Hacker, yeah, 30 points, but again, you've got this Knox Trooper, which costs 17 points and has like an SMG and is really cheap and can still put up the support wear, so I don't think I'd recommend that. Yeah. Unless you've just been hacked to death by like nomads or something, and your hacker is just dying every time, and you want to have ambush camo. But again, the thing about ambush camo is it goes away once you use it. So yeah, he's gonna want to put up support where then he's gonna be vulnerable anyway. He does have willpower 14 and BTS 6, so he's pretty good at defending. But still, Killer Hacker's gonna get the better of him at the end of the day. So my friends, I'm gonna say that if you're running a list which is wants to go first, maybe because you've taken the beautiful new Speculos, for example. And if you want to go first and you've got more than 2 order groups, boarding shotgun, lieutenant, tactical guy here is probably the way to go. The shock marksman rifle, fine, but just remember that if a guy's sitting at the back trying not to die, you're probably not going to be wanting to do much shooting with him, so may as well save 5 points, right? Most of the time. The Tensho Expert. So this is an interesting new model. When you first look at him, you go, oh, okay, he can be in a link team, he's got a boarding shotgun, he can be a Knox Trooper, and he's 16 points. And then when we go back to the Knox Troopers, we're like, well, you know, we're just wanting our guys to be as cheap as possible, and we can already take a 16-point paramedic specialist. Like, why would you bother? Like, why would you bother taking this guy? So, 2 reasons. If you're running the Knox Trooper link team, for example, let's say you've got Shishkin in there and you've decided to go all in and you're going Lieutenant Shishkin and you've got your Knox troops, you've got a couple of basic buddies and you've got a paramedic and a forward observer, so that's all you really need. Maybe a hacker or Victor or whatever, but this is what you're starting with. Then you come over to this Tensho Expert and you realize a couple of things. Number 1, boarding shotgun's something which is not really available here. Okay, so adding that in does mean that you may come across a situation where you have run across the table, Shishkin's murdered everybody, and then your boarding shotgun can move around the corner and get a template on 4 or 5 guys, you know, living the dream, whereas Shishkin would probably, you know, take a flamethrower to the face or something undesirable. Did I mention, by the way, before I finish this thought, that Shishkin is still a light infantry model, even though she's got 2 wounds, so can't be hacked? Like, what the fuck? So back to the Tensho, though. So the Tensho has the boarding shotgun, whereas that's not available to this little team here. But the other very important thing is veteran level 1. So let's say you're playing a mission like Capture and Protect, and Shishkin's shredded everybody, but there's still a single guy holding a jammer right next to the objective, and you just can't get in there. Well, your link team's already moved over there. You simply move the Tensho to grab the objective. It's immune to the effects of isolation thanks to veteran level 1. And you win, basically. So that's why this guy is really, really good, because jammers are becoming more prevalent in the game, with nomads picking them up and Pano picking them up, and Hakslam obviously still retaining them. So for that reason, I would add a Tensho Expert to your link team of Knox Troopers, for sure. Victor Messer. So this is a brand new special character. The model for him's looking really, really cool. This guy is interesting. So for those of you out there who like hacking device pluses and rate them highly, then obviously you're going to love this model. If you're the kind of person like me, perhaps, which has seen hacking devices and play a fair bit, but has never been completely sold on their effectiveness, you won't be completely sold on this character either. But he is good. I will be taking him sometimes. I just don't think he's an auto-include. The thing about Hacking Device Plus is that, you know, Cybermask is nice, but it's situational, and it's not, you know, worth too big an investment. White Noise is nice, but when you're Shishkin and you're critting so heavily anyway, like somewhere between 40 and 50% when you throw your 5 dice, do you really need the White Noise template? You're in a faction which now has these Gwaileos which have albedos, which does the same thing. Do you really need this guy to supply the White Noise template? And if you're just going to use them for stuff like, you know, support wear, couldn't you just get away with a 17 points Knox Trooper? So that's really the thought. Having said that, you know, if you take the 28-point boarding shotgun of Victor Mesa and add him to a 3-man or 5-man link team with Shishkin, he's still adding some tools which you're not getting otherwise. So the 2 nanopulses plus the link, you're firing 3 nanopulses. Pretty good. Boarding shotgun, well, Shishkin doesn't have that, so he brings that like the Tensho Expert does. Yes, there are going to be situations where there's an MSV2 model, and you really do want a white hacking noise. A white noise, hacking template. Let's say you're going up against a player who's got a Marut, for example, a tag with armor 8 and a multi-HMG and MSV2. Well, if you throw down the white noise first and then shred him with Shishkin, it's a bit safer, because what can happen potentially is that Marut can hold out for a while, and if it gets lucky and crits you, or just wins the face-to-face roll, then Shishkin may die, whereas that's much less likely when the Marut is at -6, for example. Don't forget, though, that the white noise template is not going to affect models in link teams with 6 Sense Level 2, because in the same way that they ignore the -6 penalty for shooting back through smoke, they'll ignore that for white noise as well. So it's hard to say. I do love that he has a nano screen and can basically, come along with Shishkin as a wild card. For example, the new Haris that you can make with the M drone. So if you take the FTO nano screen and the Shishkin by itself as a wild card and a Gwaileo, all three of them have nano screens. Or if Victor Mesa wild cards in for one of them, he can be having a nano screen as well. So everybody basically moves out of cover and still retains cover. So I find that's really cool. He does have NWI, but does not have shock immunity, so be careful with him. He's going to be particularly vulnerable to shock ammunition and even hacking programs which have some form of shock as well. So you got to be careful with him. Lovely model, like I said. Multi-rifle, I don't know how useful that will be if you're already in a link team with a model that has a gun like that. For example, Shishkin. So yeah, I'd be preferring the boarding shotgun, rather save the 6 points. I will be running him sometimes. Possibly even in a list that don't include Shishkin, so he's like the point man in the link team where she's not there. But yeah, really interesting. I'm glad that he's in the sectorial. It's cool to add a little bit more technological oomph like SHASVASTI ought to have. Corax Hasht is the Diafo special character that SHASVASTI's had for a while, and it's just a bit sad now that when you compare her directly to Shishkin, you'd never want to take Corax Hasht unless maybe you're playing a game where it's like a 150 point game or something, and you're just desperate to save points, but you still want a decent gun in there. I mean, your Spitfire, it doesn't have a fatality level 2, doesn't have shock, 4-4 speed instead of 6-4, no close combat ability whatsoever. Yeah, you've got shock immunity and NWI instead of 2 wounds. I really find it hard to like this character anymore. In the old SHASVASTI, I did make one list which featured Corax Hasht plus Shishkin plus 3 of those old school line trooper guys with a 4-2 speed. But nowadays, now with the changes to the sectorial, I just can't see any reason to take her anymore. I'm sorry guys, I just can't do it. I just think there's too much other stuff that you'd want to take instead. The Gwaeleos have changed a lot. So this used to be a model with 4-2 speed, used to be a 1-wound model, and the guns used to be quite significantly different. This model is really impressive now. So the nano screen's still there, so you can deploy in these awkward spots where your opponent can get around the cover, but not the case because nano screen. A lot of the time you're still going to want to put it in normal cover spots anyway, because total cover, the opportunity to go behind total cover, is more important. So that's just really quite critical. But now it's got an albedo. So there are a couple of models in the game which already had the albedo. We're talking the Blackfriar, which I was never a big fan of, and the Overtron, which I was a pretty big fan of. But this guy's just feels like he's going to be a little bit more mobile than they are, and his shooting potential feels like it'll be a little bit more useful than what they have, because he's linkable for starters, so that's something. And he's got that beautiful option of MSV2 heavy rocket launcher and the link team, which is my preference here. So he's useful against smoke and TO camo and all the normal stuff that MSV2 is useful against, but he's also useful against other MSV2 models with the albedo. So this guy is an amazing counter to something like an intruder, sitting up there with his multi-sniper, because he's able to get into position, can't be shot by the intruder, and then goes to the discover, or if the intruder's revealed himself, and just wrecks him, because he's just shooting at natural 13s with probably 3 dice in a link team, and the intruder's shooting back at minus, +3 for range, -3 for the nanoscreen, -6 for the albedo, so it gets pretty disgusting. I love the fact that he's got an HMG option, which is really cool. I think that taking MSV2 somewhere in your list is going to be so important that you're going to want the HRL most of the time, but I'm not seeing any other wonderful HMG options anywhere else. You can take a basic Knox Trooper HMG, and of course you can take the Q drone, is going to be great there. But in terms of just basic troopers holding them, this guy's about it. Funnily enough, though, when you've got Shishkin, even if Shishkin's shooting at the wrong range band, because she's BS15 and because she's critting on such a high percentage, it's almost more powerful than an HMG at the correct range band. So given that that's the case, I don't even feel like it's necessary to take the HMG if Shishkin's already in a link team in your list. So and the AP Spitfire, same reason. So that's why I'd go for the heavy rocket launcher, because with the heavy rocket launcher and the albedo and the MSV2, there's occasionally going to be targets that this guy does well against that Shishkin's not going to go up against. And for that reason, I think I'd like to announce that my preferred link team for Shishkin is this. Shishkin, Lieutenant, and the Gwaileo, MSV2, and the new M-Drone nanoscreen. So this Haris is basically formed from the Gwaileo Special Fire Team Haris with 2 M-Drones, but Shishkin is wildcarding in to count as one of the M-Drones. So the reason why I like this link team is that you got your Lieutenant in there, and you're going to have a Caliban for supporting it. She's going to do most of the heavy hitting, or pretty much all of the heavy hitting, straight up attacking. The thing is, sometimes she's going to be racing around the battlefield, and some Gazimatir was going to sacrifice himself and throw a smoke grenade over in the corner and, block a really important trooper. And that's when you come in with the Gwaileo, who's been tagging along with Shishkin the entire time, and then you go and blow up their stuff, which has been covered by the smoke, right? Or maybe you are worried about going up against that Marut with Shishkin for some reason, and you want to attack with the Gwaileo with the albedo, for example. I don't know why. I mean, I'd probably go with Shishkin anyway, just because of the crits. But yeah, if you do lose Shishkin, you've brought Gwaileo along. He could still fight pretty well. And in ARO, he's potentially better than Shishkin for the AROs, even though she's got Fatality, because if he's hitting with the correct range band, or if he's going up against something that has Teo Camo ODD, he's a much better ARO piece than she will be. So that partnership is really, really cool. Bringing the M-Drone in, it costs more, but all 3 of them have nanoscreens, so they can all move out, and if they get surprised by a TO sniper, for example, the TO sniper is still up against cover no matter which target he goes for, and you're bringing in a nice little specialist with the group as well, which really rounds that out. So I love this trio. I'm going to be running them a lot. So that's the Gwaileo. He can be your lieutenant, but again, I don't really think you'd want him as your lieutenant when you've got better options elsewhere, unless maybe you're not running Shishkin in the list at all, and you do have that Caliban. It might be the way to go. The Sphinx hasn't changed. He's still a beast. The only thing that's different now is that Shishkin is so powerful for this kind of thing that you may be wanting to run your limited assertion list based around her anyway. I don't quite think that's always going to be the case. I think I will still run the Sphinx list sometimes anyway, because with the Sphinx, you're committing one model rather than a group, and he's obviously got Climbing Plus and Mark Estate and that extra speed to get on top of buildings, so there are going to be some tables where he's better. I can imagine going to an ITS tournament and having my Shishkin list and my Sphinx list, and if I see a table where Climbing Plus is going to win me the game, likely win me the game, I would run the Sphinx list and just throw that in. Whereas if it's a bit more of a flatter sort of level table where Climbing Plus is not going to matter as much, a lot of walls and things, Shishkin would be the better chick for the job. Righty, so we've got through a lot of profiles here for SHASVASTI. I'm not going to talk about the new changes here because there aren't any for the drones. I mean, same E-drone, really good for the Exile if you're up against link teams, can be handy. Echadron's essential in just about any list. The new M-drone nanoscreen, there's not too much to add apart from the fact that it's linkable and the nanoscreen's there. If you're going to be playing just without a link team, though, it's probably not worth it, I think. Q drones, don't forget you can take 2 of them in the sectorial, which is quite fun. I've written up a list which has 2 Q drones in it, and the difference is now that unlike before, SHASVASTII can actually take a nice cheap Knox Trooper, support wear your monkey over here for 17 points, and you chuck out your assisted fire or whatever on your Q drones, so that could be really cool. Or you could take one HMG and one plasma Q drone, for example, could be quite effective. Single R drone, obviously, slave drone, T drones, obviously you've got the FTO as well, which some people will run, that may be your cup of tea. Let's move on to the last 4 profiles, because these are kind of exciting. So the Malignus has been buffed, and by buffed I mean that there's now this wonderful killer hacking profile in there, and just I find it amazing how having a killer hacking device makes your model better but cheaper at the same time. I just can't get my head around how Corvus Belli think that. So this is a model deploying TO camo up the middle field with infiltration. A submachine gun is better than a combi rifle at short range, and that's what this guy has. This particular profile has a Dazer now, which is a really cool piece of tech. It basically creates this little field around you, which is difficult terrain. It really reminds me of Baldur from War Machine and Hordes, the Circle Warlock, who is able to put a little forest around him, or a little thing around him. So that's a thing. And he still has anti-personal mines, and the killer hacking device is more useful than, say, being a forward observer or an assault hacker most of the time. And this guy is the cheapest Malignus profile. So even though I did take Malignus maybe 10, 20, 30% of my games already, if not more, this guy will see even more play now that he's got that profile. Because, hey, cheaper and better. So, great decisions, guys. Great game design. Specular killers have always been and will continue to be a really, really powerful trooper. Impersonation is an amazing ability. The only reason why I don't use them every single game is that it's a bit of a commitment to points, and if you don't take first turn, their ability can be their potential can be a bit limited, and there are a lot of scenarios where you do want to take second turn, which is why I kind of shy away from taking them too much. There's a new profile though, and oh boy. So apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was just reading the forums recently, or Facebook, and from what I've seen, if you deploy this model on their side of the table, and you have a mine with them from mine layer, the mine can just deploy in range of any enemy models, and then you start activating straight away, and as soon as they're ARO, the mine blows up on them, which I find completely horrifying. The only thing you can't do is have the mine deployed within range of an enemy marker, apparently. I hope that I've got the rules wrong. I hope that it's not the case you're allowed to just deploy the mine next to enemy models, but you think about it, if this guy passes the whip check, or whatever it is, to get into the deployment zone as the reserve trooper and puts his mine next to a bunch of enemy cheerleaders or something and then starts shooting at them with a combi rifle, they're going to have to dodge or whatever and potentially get blown up. So it's a points commitment with 39 points and 1.5 SWCs, but if you know that you're going to be trying to get the first turn, or if you have something useful to do with them in the second turn, like deploy them in the middle of the table in Transmission Matrix, for example, very powerful profile. The one list which I think is really cool for this profile is where you decide to take 2 Speculos. So one of them has the boarding shotgun, the other one's the mine layer, and you fill the rest of the list with stuff that isn't Shishkin, so you can afford the points. Then it could potentially be really, really good. I had a list saved somewhere, but yeah, so my list had 2 Speculos, 2 Q drones, a Knox Trooper link team with the Knox hacker to put assisted fire up, and Victor Messer was in there as well. And I still had room for some of the tiger creatures we had before, so I might run that list sometime soon in a bat rep. The Shrouded couldn't have killer hacker devices before, now they can. These guys, I took them so much. Almost every SHASVASTI list, almost every vanilla combined list. Anytime you've got a nice, cheap, reliable camo marker model specialist that can deploy out in the middle of the field, you always take these guys, and this is no exception. And they've now just become slightly better because they can have an EI killer hacking device. And EI killer hacking devices are even better than normal killer hacking devices, so it's just buffs all round. I'm not really seeing many nerfs here. Alright, so I've been talking for over an hour. It's time to wrap up the video. And lastly, we've got the tiger creature. Similar to Pretas, similar to Gakis, and I think it's just amazing that the SHASVASTI, have finally got their hands on a little bit of a warband. I felt like it's a perfect fit. They're a great faction to have that kind of thing. So these guys are comparable. The main differences we need to focus on, though, is that these guys don't have Explode or Dogged, and they don't have Climbing Plus. In exchange for that, they've got Berserk, so they're much better in close combat than their other counterparts. And they have Hyperdynamics level 1, which means they dodge more easily. So they're more annoying to get rid of. You have them impetuousing out into the field, and you see that TO sniper show up and try and shoot you, or maybe just a regular, walker or something. And you're surviving those arrows much more often. And in your reactive turn, as they're coming through to try and clear your Tiger out of the way so they can avoid the chain cult, it's dodging a lot more often. And using kinematic to get closer to them and putting the chain cult in their way, very, very powerful. So I always lamented the fact that the Pretas and the Gakis just were never that scary in close combat, even though they were the typical close combat aliens that run towards you like they do in the movies. This guy feels a lot more like that, though, because Berserk allows him to do that damage and implement that physical 13, and he's actually got access to a DACC weapon, for example. I would save the point and just take the 5-point guy most of the time, but still, it's great to have that option. So the Taika creature is definitely something I'll be taking in lists, but only when it's sort of like I've already got to 13, 14 orders, regular orders, and then I'm adding a few of them at the back there. A lot of the time I'll be running SHASVASTI as just a limited insertion, clean cut, 10 order list, and in that case I won't include these guys, but it's amazing to have them in the sectorial now. Ooh, well, that was exciting. This is a really cool sectorial now, not just in style, but in terms of their power level. I don't know if they're number 1 sectorial in the game. I still think Vanilla Toha are very, very strong, especially with the new changes to their new profiles. Symbimates did get nerfed, thank God for that. I'll talk about that more in another video, but they're still right up there. Vanilla Hakaslam still right up there because of their aggressive potential with Tariq and Daylamis and Al-Jabal and obviously the Gazamatiwas and the Hunzakuts and all the great things that faction has. Jammers especially, and Vanilla Nomads getting Jammers being right up there as well. These are very, very strong factions, and for me to count SHASVASTI right up there yet, I'm not 100% sure, because the most powerful thing here is Shishkin, but I'm yet to see how well a lot of the other stuff will go. Having said that, I already felt like before the changes, SHASVASTI were one of my strongest factions that I would play in tournaments, because I'd managed to work so hard in coming up with such great lists for them. And now they're just a lot better. So expect me to be playing them a lot more. Expect a lot of sculpts to come out. Hopefully the model range is good. I expect it to be. I'll probably have to buy my whole army again. I would recommend not buying any SHASVASTI in the near future, guys, just because you'll be buying old sculpts which will be replaced by new stuff. So try and avoid doing that. Use proxies and things. But this is a really cool sectorial now. So you'll be seeing some bat reps, you'll be seeing more commentary, and you'll also be seeing some more faction review videos in the near future, so keep an eye out for them, and as always, come to talk to us about it on Discord. For now, that's been SHASVASTI.